Hi, Jason. Welcome to the podcast.
Mate, awesome to be here hanging out with you today.
It's nice to have the last time we spoke, I was actually on your podcast, which I think was well over 12 months ago. So I'm really excited to turn the tables and put you on the hot seat for the
Mate, looking forward to it.
next 45 minutes or whatever, it'll be an hour. Look, like I was saying off air, I might be a bit rusty because we've just done back-to-back retreats and took a month off podcasting. And I think I'm breathing out. So it's been a really nice break. So I'm looking forward to see if my mouth actually meets my brain when we talk for the next hour. But as always on the podcast, mate, I ask the same question when starting out, which is a nice way instead of jumping into a bio or something.
Yeah.
But if you were at a dinner table right now and you were sitting next to a stranger and they asked you what you did for a living, how would you answer that?
Gee, it's a good question. Sometimes I answer it in a few different ways, and I'll answer it in a way that I'd like to continue to engage with you into the future rather than avoid engagement into the future. But listen, I say to people that I help people, transform their relationship with their future wealth. I do that through very practically the world of real estate. But like you and I were chatting off air, real estate's just a word. The transformation comes with people's relationship with money, their stories around money, wealth, and what that looks like in the future. So, yeah, help you transform your financial future into something better than you're on track for now really would be my answer to most people. Sometimes I don't want to talk about it with people, so I just tell people I'm in finance otherwise.
And then they'll go, oh, fair enough, and leave it. It really depends how you answer it, isn't it?
That's right. That is exactly right, yeah.
I'm curious. I'd love to get your perspective on this then, because you asked me at the end of the podcast when we were chatting last time, but what does wealth then, true wealth, mean to you? And has that changed over the years for you?
I'm glad you asked that follow-up question because it has at 100%. When I was a lot younger than I am today, well, wealth meant money and buying things. Like it was very one-dimensional and probably immature, and I don't say that in a bad way. Many of us sort of mature into what the concept means, right? Mm-hmm. I think the older we become, the more experiences we have, the more things we realize we actually care about. Often many of us mature into, caring about more than just ourselves and the things we have, right? It's transformed over time. But really for me now, the concept of true wealth for me is choices. So I can choose to work, I can choose not to work. I love what I do. I don't consider it work. I had a holiday last week actually. I took 10 days off, Shay and I, my wife, and I called a few people from my team because when I'm holidaying, I'm thinking. And one of them said, gee, your definition of a holiday and my definition of a holiday are really different because I'm always thinking about what I'm doing. So, choices for me, you can choose which way you want to roll. Do I work? Do I not work? Also, the ability to significantly assist and influence some things I care about and people I care about. E.g., I love helping my family if they have or need things. Some of my family aren't as good off or well off as me, and we've been able to significantly improve their quality of life when it comes to health and other things as well. Certainly close to home, my own children for sure. But, the other thing, I don't know if you can see the shirt here, powered by purpose, people, place and planet. We've now, over the last 10 years, built 18 schools and 3 libraries. Close to 9,000 children go to school every day because of the wealth, the true wealth, which I believe true wealth ultimately is your ability to gather assets and pay it forward and magnify it into the world. So, I can do that through my family. I can do that through my business growing. And I can do that through, these charities and schools that I support. So
you give me goosebumps saying that, mate. Seriously. Like, was there a point then in your life where it wasn't just a definitive point where it wasn't just me and then it is a we, because it's almost like the less we have, the more we get consumed by our own stresses and our own problems, and money is such a huge factor in our general well-being of how our mood daily. Like, because if we're always stressed and concerned about it, or if we're always holding on to what we have, and like paying it forward can feel so foreign to so many people.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. When you said that, it reminds me of like that, that hierarchy of needs. I think, is it Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yeah,
Where sort of survival, right? Um, and I have noticed, like, this is 100% personal observation, and then observing others. I've had the privilege to sit with people and talk about their money, like literally tens of thousands of people one on one like this, in one way, shape, or form. And it's really interesting. Money is very private and very weird for a lot of people to talk about openly and for real. Very much like somebody's, let's say, religious beliefs, or their sexual orientation, or what do they say at a dinner party? Don't talk about politics, money, sex, and drugs or something, and you'll be all right, or whatever.
yeah.
But
It was about we started talking into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Remember about
yeah,
me and we and the
yeah,
survival
yeah,
aspect of that.
yeah. And that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that survival, end of town. When when our financial wellness gets beyond that, I see a lot of people being able to think of we, like who else we would be able to do. I think often part of it is you can't wait until you've got more than you need to be including a we in your financial life. And I think, for me, just observing, with relationships and other things as well, it's not about like, wait till you're perfect to have a relationship, or wait till your finances are perfect to be able to pay a bit forward. It's part of the journey of becoming better, starting wherever you are.
Yeah,
I see a lot of people kick into survival and they never get to we, because they think they have to survive, or they have to do a certain level before they can pay it forward. And I've got this concept that I teach people called moving the zero line. Um, uh, in my world, financial world, I can tell people's and it happens in my business too. I have team members. I can tell their mood. I can judge their mood, and then I can guess their bank account or their financial financial situation. And it's so accurate, because when people are stressed and doing really random weird things, I'm like, that person's got some financial challenges. Like, and it's usually one of three things. It's either a financial challenge, a relationship challenge. Their relationship's a bit something, or some sort of, personal direction challenge, like, I'm doing one career and I don't like it anymore, or something like that. But in my world, I get exposed to that money conversation often. It's just like, okay, I can feel your vibe, and your vibe correlates with your bank account, So, I can understand. And I used to behave that way too, Guy,
yeah,
like when the bank account was low, and, I couldn't pay the bills, the next week or the next month, then, there was a high level of stress in my life and household,
totally. I find the whole thing fascinating, because one thing I didn't expect from my side is, now that we're coming out of the pandemic and we can actually put the foot in the gas, if you like, and start getting
Yeah.
back out there in front of workshops and retreats, and we're spending more advertising money, we're marketing more, and we really want to get in front and help as many people as possible that want to lean into this work, But the one thing that's really surprised me is people start throwing stones at us as well at the same time about, I
Mm.
can't believe you're charging for this, like, that's too expensive, without even knowing what we do, where we're at, or what we're presenting. Absolutely no concept. Almost like a tall poppy syndrome kind of thing, if you start poking your.
Yeah. And I've experienced that too over the years, and it's an interesting one, especially in our world where we coach, educate, support, life changing. It's a life changing thing. My experience is in Australia and mostly Australian customers, Australian and New Zealanders. So I don't know if this is a worldwide phenomenon, but something special or something sacred or something kind of special to a person. I observe many people feeling like money being involved dirties it or devalues it or makes it less or something like that. And I think that maybe comes around to some of the conversation we were having about people's, relationship with money. And so, if Guy has a very amazing thing that he could teach the world, I think it's fantastic that he gives value and gets value, and the get value is in the form of often money, right? So you can't avoid that in the whole world. It's the mechanism of which we've always traded, whether it's been cash now or gold bars or coins or some potatoes for something or other. So it is a strange one, mate, and we've had it too. So over the years, we've just sort of said, well, listen, how you appreciate me is, in the form of dollars and cents. And then how I appreciate you is by doing what we said we were going to do that transforms your future life in an amazing way. So when we realize what that looks like and we appreciate the exchange, sometimes that sort of, takes that sort of grayness or weirdness out of it on my side. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it is related to money and often many people's, and I'm going to say poor, but I don't mean it in that way, but it's just a very poor relationship with what it is to them, what money means to them and the emotions it stirs up.
A lot, yeah.
Yeah.
As you're listening to you speak, and the question I want to dig in with you is because I've had, I think I've had it, Bruce Lipton. Are you familiar with Bruce Lipton, Dr. Bruce Lipton?
Yeah, that's the molecules of emotion, isn't it?
But
Is it
he wrote Biology of Belief and
biology of belief? Yes.
yeah, Honeymoon Effect.
Candace,
yes, I've got that book on Audible. Actually, it's a big read. Jesus.
Yeah. They're pretty. I enjoyed both of those. Yeah.
Yeah, and and Bruce always talks about 90. I think it's 90% of our beliefs are actually formed between conception and the age of 7. And that becomes our fundamental foundation as we then become into adulthood. But quite often, as adults, we're actually playing out childhood beliefs and stories that we just didn't form with an analytical mind. So they're just embodied in us, and it kind of creates this kind of way of being that we then layer upon our perception on daily life. So my question to you is then, what were your first 0 to 7 years like, and your upbringing? And was there then shifts that you've had to overcome or beliefs to then roll into the person you are today and with positive real estate and so forth?
Yeah, I totally, and big effort and shifts and stuff like that as well. And the universe bashed me around a bit to sort of say, hang on, if you want this change, it's coming to you. But my first 7 years, I can only remember very fondly as a child. Like, I grew up in a place which was amazingly orientated around family, a very small country town in outback Australia. And literally everyone I knew, it was either a cousin, a second cousin, or it was literally I was nearly related to everyone in the town, and that's why I had to leave to find a partner. But it was a very beautiful, wonderful upbringing. So one of the things that I know that has I've had to work on is where I grew up. Nobody had money. Nobody had money. Everybody worked for maybe 5-6 months of the year, and then everyone else just got by a bit of barter, a bit of exchange, a bit of helping people. It was actually a quite nice upbringing. If you needed something to fix your push bike, you went to the rubbish dump and found some old things, and then you kind of brought them home and fixed them. It was a real sort of subsistence way of living, and it was really nice. Like, I loved it. So my first 7 years was formative in that way. So these days, I still like to build things myself, and
Yeah.
do projects and those sorts of things. But a bit of that was in and around money. Certainly for me, I had to push through and overcome, the idea of how my my upbringing and family, thought about people with money as well. So the rich wankers, those people, people with money was someone else, not someone you knew. People with money or success had always ultimately lied or stolen or cheated or misled, or were taking advantage of someone or ripping someone off. Like there was all these like negative connotations to it. Indirectly, but the only ever times those conversations came up were in those negative ways. Someone had done something. So certainly, and I did a little bit of work a while ago. I've done a few courses. You and I were chatting about them. Tony Robbins and all sorts of courses and books and whatever over the years. One of the things I realized was I loved adventures and doing interesting things. So my entrepreneurial journey started because I liked adventure. I liked doing things. I liked going places and discovering. It wasn't driven financially to begin with. It was driven out of adventure and interest and excitement. So and over time, then you go, well, maybe as learning to be better at this thing that we were doing, building a business and creating wealth through real estate, was just like, oh, I better learn how to do that a bit better, 25 years ago. And, that ultimate, like, tuning up over 25 years has sort of, led me, to really, really think how I think about money very differently today than it was, 25 years ago, for sure.
Yeah. I find it fascinating that your actual drive was the adventure of it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
the money.
It was secondary. Yeah. It was totally secondary. Which, in itself caused me problems to begin with, because, doing something and losing money is not a good idea, because that becomes painful. So I had to balance up my need for adventure and new things with some practicalities, if that was the type of adventure I wanted, right? So, learned along the way.
Yeah, no,
how to do it a bit better.
It's a huge. It resonates so much because when I started the natural protein supplement company back in 2010, it wasn't to try and be because we were the first to market to have this kind of idea back then, but none of that drove it. It was literally the frustration of the food industry and working with people with cancer and seeing the amount of poor food choices that were available, even in the fitness industry.
Yeah.
And it was like, it came from like this anger but also this drive and this want to infiltrate. I think if I was actually just trying to see how many bags of bloody protein I could sell, it never would have moved in the first place. Very different motivation behind everything. Just to give people context then of where you're at today then. So correct me if I'm wrong. I got a couple of stats off Marcus Pierce here, but Positive Real Estate's been going for 20 years, your company? Is that correct?
Literally this year, 20-year anniversary of incorporation.
That's insane. And how many companies survive 20 years, mate? Do you know the stats on that?
Not a lot, but it's kind of less than 1% or something like that. Like there's a stat that we use. Less than 5 survive 10 years, less than 5%. So,
wow.
yeah.
And how many staff are now working for Positive Real Estate?
So we got over 140, I think it's 143 across Australia and New Zealand. And we've got some other places too. We've got a team in Manila and some people in Argentina. The world of Zoom and digital has been able to, help expand it as well. And they're all full-time team members as well. So, yeah.
That's incredible. And my question to you is, my knees start to shake when you said 143 staff members, right? And so my question to you is like, how do you manage to stay so grounded and to be because you, like you said, you go on holiday for 10 days. Even though you're thinking, you have this amazing ability to be very you, mate. Like, do you know what I mean? Like every time I've
Yeah.
met you, you never appear stressed. Which maybe, I don't know, maybe you just can camouflage it really well or something. I'm not sure. But honestly, like when I look from the outside looking in, I have nothing but admiration for you because of what you do and the way you're paying it forward, the what you've created and built and work with. But yet you still are able to live a fully rich life while doing it all. What's the
Yeah.
secret? Like, what are you?
Well, what's helped me a lot is just great people to be part of the team, you know. And I think, you know, when I said I love adventures, probably to be more accurate, I love adventures with other people, right? And I love adventuring with people who love adventures. So, you know, one of if I would say a secret or maybe a special source to, you know, how I've enjoyed this journey has been that I've been able to, you know, find and have, you know, deep, meaningful, value-led, you know, adventures with cool people, you know, who like the idea of doing something fun and awesome, you know, in a certain place and see, you know, a bigger picture. We've got a visitor in the background. um, so, mate, you know, that's been my secret, to have great team members come on a very cool journey with me doing it together. It certainly something that's, you know, you couldn't do by yourself. It's not about me. You know, I suppose probably I've always been a we person rather than a me person. You know,
Yeah,
it's all of us. Like we do it together, and you know, the big picture and the plan grows as you get cooler people around you and have, you know, those people to support you. And, you know, I can go away for 10 days, a month. We've been away for months before, and things go really, really well. And, you know, I think that's the secret. Great people who are values aligned with you, who want to, you know, want to do something cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Was there dark times? Because there's one moment I wouldn't love to have a conversation with you about as well is the GFC, the global financial crisis. Because Marcus mentioned as well that there was a point there where you had absolute adversity and had to make decisions going through that. Would you mind talking us through a little bit what happened at the time and
Yeah.
how you bounced back from that as well? Like, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, mate, yeah, I mean, the GFC, you know, 100% a big learning curve for me. You know, this business of PRE kicked off in 2003, and really, I got interested in buying property and understanding what that might look like after I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad from Robert Kiyosaki. I thought, oh, it's a great read. This sounds exciting. I'd like to know more. Let's go buy some real estate. Um, and you know, from that point onwards, there was a few bumps and bruises, but really it was kind of an upward trajectory from learning and owning and knowing nothing, you know, all the way to sort of, you know, 2009, where we'd grown the business. You know, we owned over 100 properties. You know, we had a number of property developments underway, you know, across Queensland and Victoria. You know, we at that point in time there was about $40 million worth of developments we had underway. So we were sort of really, you know, hooking in and thinking, you know, this is amazing. Basically, from 2003 to 2009, sort of an upward trajectory ride. You know, thinking, you know, how easy is this? Not necessarily how easy is this, but you know,
Yeah.
it went in a pretty good direction. But you know, the GFC really put the skids on, and we had you know, some exposure when it came to large amounts of lending that was you know, pretty significant. You know, overnight, that $40 million worth of, you know, projects was worth, you know, $20 million, and we owed $35 million on it, right? So, yeah, and you know, the machinations of commercial borrowing and commercial property, and commercial meaning developing real estate rather than owning residential real estate, is very, very different to mums and dads buying a house. and the treatment from the lenders and the marketplace for you as a borrower commercially compared to residentially, very different. So, we were called in on our loans because the values of our developments went down. We didn't have the cash and capital to cover those call-ins, So basically when your values go down because of lending constraints in commercial property, the bank will say, hey, you need to give me $5 million of cash right now to balance the scales, right? Because that was our agreement. And you could imagine, we've got $40 million worth of projects underway. We haven't got $5 million worth of cash just sitting around out the back there. It's all in these projects, So, listen, we went from sort of hero to negative, many zeros almost overnight, it felt like, in the GFC, and that certainly was some very stressful and dark times. After it took me many years, like I would say 4 to 5 years, to fully feel what I would call normal Jason again after the GFC. It took me some deep soul searching, a lot of support from my business partners and my life partner, to come back from that. We made some good decisions early on how we structured ourselves. So thankfully, it wasn't like a total implosion. It was extremely hard, but we navigated through it. And some of this stuff, we had some friends and some clients lose money. There was about $2 million of capital we lost with some of our clients and customers. In the end, it was a pretty tough time to try and navigate. What are we going to do about these things? And one of the things that I had an early mentor say to me, it takes a long time to build a reputation, and it often takes a short time to lose it. One of my personal decisions was to personally take care and cover the personal investors that were in our projects, in our things. $2 million. I said personally I'd pay it back. I didn't know how to do it, but I said I would. It took me 10 years to pay them all back after tax money, to all of those investors, $2 million plus manage, going forward. And excuse me, managing the business and, managing our own stuff. So it was pretty tough times, for sure. After the GFC wasn't a picnic, I can tell you.
And that's incredible, mate. And to do that as well, like you say, pay back all your clients and everything, it's amazing. Are you, and I'm thinking about everyone listening to this, because everyone that listens to my podcast listens for many different reasons. And many people are in that hole, like you spoke about right now, in that period of time. And it can feel like there's never any light at the end of the tunnel when you're in the middle of it. You know what I mean? As I'm sure you do. Yes. But looking back now, are you glad you went through that and survived and come out the other side? Or do you think, did it happen for a reason? Or do you think it's just bad luck? Or
it certainly wasn't bad luck, because it can be managed and avoided. There was some exposure there that, if I had some other advice early on or looked at it in a different way, I could have minimized. Let's say it probably wouldn't have been avoided, but it would have been minimized. I didn't cause the global financial crisis, right? I was caught up in some of the wreckage, the carnage of it. For me, I look back and say, yes, it was an absolutely formative piece of who I am today. And today I wouldn't change that, But I could tell you many times, if I had a magic wand or a big red button in the moment, I would have pressed that sucker and gotten the hell out of there, or waved the magic wand, like, get me away from this stuff. And I think often it's easy to say it when I'm sitting here, not when you're right there. So if anyone's listening and they're right there, you probably just start swearing at both of us, going, "Piss off! You don't know what I'm feeling, but I do know what you're feeling." It gets better, and it gets better with time. So time does its thing, Guy. But one of the things that I can say, like categorically, is if you as an individual can get better at making it, like defining what it means to you, it gets better, magnificently better. I don't know. It's better because you make it better by making it mean better things. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Yep.
I was going to say, change the meaning of it, and then you can change the complete context of it in that moment.
Yeah, because really, at the end of the day, if you think about it, it's the only thing that we're in charge of. Like you're in charge of deciding consciously what you can decide it to mean. That's it. I think everything else is a co-creation if you're lucky, or you're just influenced by it. So
Absolutely, yeah. Because we get people come to our retreats for all sorts of reasons, Jason.
Yeah.
Some are on they just want a mystical experience and go straight down the rabbit hole, but many from the other end have had horrific things happen to them through their life and different traumas, and they're holding that, and it always feels like it's holding them back. There's just this part, but like you say, if you can get to the point with someone or within ourselves, or guide someone there to really shift the meaning and be able to then see the wisdom from what is presented itself from you without having a emotional charge from it or of any kind, and be able to take that and enhance your life moving forward, it changes everything, and we can be free of those trappings. It's a big deal for sure.
Yeah, massively impactful and powerful. Yeah.
It's
easy to look at in reverse, but if anyone could take any tips away from it right now,
exactly like you said. But when you're in it, it's a different story altogether. I'm curious to dive into, because we spoke a little bit off there that you looked into ayahuasca, which was something which was a big deal for me at the time. I remember doing it almost 10 years ago, and I had a fear around psychedelics because I actually took a bunch when I was like 15. Mushrooms grew very wildly up in the valleys of Wales, mate. I don't know if you knew that. But I think I was about 14 or 15, didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I never touched the drug again after that. I was like, just, but then as I was leaning in more to this work and wanted to understand more about who I am, I was called, like, it's kind of weird, but I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah.
And it was a defining moment in my life because I really overcame some fears of myself. I was just curious, why did you, when did you first hear about it? Why did you decide to do an ayahuasca journey? Because it's no picnic when you do it either.
No, it's not, certainly. Well, for me, I wasn't. Adventures for me as a kid were more out into the bush and climbing mountains and paddling up rivers and fishing for weeks on end. So casual drug use was never in my sort of my teenage years for sure. So it was certainly didn't come at it from that angle. And to be honest, I never looked at it like that. For me, part of looking at plant medicine and other experiences, alternate experiences through some of those journeys for me have again been about getting to know myself more deeper in different ways. There hasn't been a year go by since I was 19 that I haven't done a self-development course or read a book or been involved in something. What I shout out to one of my best mates when I was 19 in the Air Force, Warren Bambridge, and he gave me a book. His parents were diamond distributors in Amway, back in the day, right? This was the echelon. I didn't even know what Amway was, and but he gave me a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I read it and it was just mind blowing. Like growing up in the country, really not enjoying school in any way, shape, or form. But this book, it was like, wow, this is so cool, right? Just started my journey. There has not been a year go by that I haven't been always learning, always experiencing, et cetera, et cetera. And I think part of it was this exposure to ayahuasca and, some of the plant medicines. A good buddy of mine, has been, working in that space for a while. And, I knew that he was there and I reached out to him because we talk deeply all the time. And I said, I think it's time I'm being called, um, for stuff. And it was 5 years ago, my first medicine journey. And I just felt a little bit funky on the edges after a decade after the GFC, and or close to a decade after the GFC, and it took me, like I said, 4 or 5 years to feel like the real me again. After some pretty significant, impacts, and then kind of, I just didn't feel, 80, 90%. There was always these little edgy triggers on the edge. Like I've talked about this a few times with my team. I used to grind my teeth, right? Grind my teeth. And it was one of these things that I remember I started doing just after the GFC because I felt always stressed and I'd be, so where do you hold it, And I always had this kind of weird knot in my gut, it's like I was grinding my jaw and this weird knot in my gut, and because I read a lot of stuff like, you and I have chatted about, and like, okay, well, there's something that I'm missing here. I just, what's a different way of coming at this? And that was where, my first, calling to, work with ayahuasca. And, I've had, I've sat with it 4 times. Like you said, it's no joke. It's not something to think about. Hey, let's get our mates together on the weekend and have a good time. We've got an amazing shaman, and what an experience! What a way to melt into yourself and experience the world really differently. It was only very, very positive outcome for me. Through those guided experiences.
How would you describe it to someone? Let's say, like, if you take it, I got to ask these questions, right? Because because there'll be a lot of people now with bated breath going, "Oh my God!" Because people reach out to me all the time saying, "Where can I go?"
Yeah.
Like, I've only done it once, But can you take it back to that first journey? How you were feeling before you went in, when you drank the medicine? Were there particular things revealed?
Yeah, so certainly my first experience, and I've got some notes somewhere actually, but again, I said at the start, I'm quite an adventurous. So, like it was kind of like I'm always open to things, and a few people that I know hate the idea of losing control, right? So, I'm like, whatever, like I understand and I know that, it's an experience, and there will be some things happen and come out of it. And again, it'll be my job to sort of make some meaning out of them, right? I'm not letting something else make the meaning for me. I'm going, wow, okay, how can I interpret that and fit it into my kind of my own rhetoric, let's say, So you got to be your own orator of the story, you've got to be the reader of the book. But yeah, no, listen, my first experience was certainly a lot to do with some of the baggage and the trauma that came from some of the experiences around the GFC. We could probably spend hours, around the campfire talking about the details of them, but my experience was with some business partners that did the wrong thing, left me with all of the damage, and the reputational issues and the financial issues, and they pissed off somewhere else and dodged every bullet that I was taking. So a lot of that baggage was there, and I really needed to sort of clear that stuff emotionally. I'm quite good mentally in my mental game, but like you would know, doing the work that you do, you can be strong in your mind, but you can't avoid where that stuff gets tucked away emotionally and physically in your body, right? And if you avoid it, it just stays there. It's got to get dealt with at some point.
Exactly. It's like a prawn, mate, that gets thrown behind the couch, and one day it's gonna
It's
it's
going to
gonna
be stinky.
yeah, it's gonna be stinky, without a doubt, and
Yeah.
but what I'm hearing, mate, and what I love is like the openness, and it's almost like not having the expectations. So many people come to our work or go to something expecting something to just get fixed, and almost push it and
Yeah.
associate the meaning to it even before it's happened,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you seem to surrender into these things very easily.
It's the right word. You surrender into it. You surrender into it. And one of the things that I've learned, and it wasn't just there, is that the integration of an experience takes time to fully settle. So don't be in any rush to, make meaning out of it, the day after or whatever it is, So, and I think, you can continue to rewrite what those things mean and make them mean, something as you go along. And so, yeah, for me, other than some of the, the potential, bibs and bobs on the nights and whatever, which is, that's just the machinations of having an experience. It was very, very, powerful for me, the experience that I had. A little anecdote. We did these cards. What are those cards where you go, they're all, uh, fortune teller cards or whatever they are,
Yeah, I know
the
exactly the one.
tarot
I wouldn't
cards,
know tarot cards.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah. So, we had two sittings, one in the evening and one the next day. And, out of 150 cards, I chose the same card twice, right? So I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And, so, for me, I think you're a surrender into the experience, allow the meaning to mature and, and make sure that, you know, you don't get too stressed about it. That's how I approach those sorts of things. But certainly on the science side, I'm a bit of a science guy as well. I love sort of details and data, and I read a heap of books and information and science about the whole thing, the default mode network in your brain and a hard reset and all this sort of stuff. And because what I was experiencing, I wanted to know about, as well as be in charge of making the meaning. So that's what I think I've always done that pretty well. I'm very happy to be foo-foo and spiritual, but I'm as equally happy to be scientific and exact and factual. I like having two of those balls to juggle at the same time, So yeah, and a lot of the science is fantastic in it too. Really interesting stuff. So yeah, there
Yeah,
you go.
yeah, no, totally. Even Gabor Mate speaks about it a lot as well, who I had on the podcast last year, and the benefits of all these different tools that allow us to
Yeah.
start to reconnect to aspects of ourselves that we might not have felt or known is available to us, and if we can then take that information and that wisdom from it and actually allow it to show up better in our daily life, that's where it's most important. I think listening to you talk, Jason, and reflecting on my own life, all this kind of work has led more into more peace within myself, which
Yeah.
then allows me to surrender into what is more, which
Yeah.
then diffuses, the stress and the drive and the push constantly. For it's like, well, why are we doing that in the first place, and how's it going to show up in our life now? That for me is the most important thing now,
Yeah.
as we move forward.
Yeah.
I'm,
It's an interesting one, isn't it? With that, there's this kind of, choosing to put yourself under some pressure and stress for a good reason. For me, I've always thought it's been great for me. It's it's the pressure and stress that you don't choose is the stuff that you really don't enjoy. And so, part of my psyche is to say, well, just if you don't get out ahead of it and choose the pressure and stresses that you want, choose the ones that you want and you think are going to get an experience, get some fun, get some outcome for you, then that someone else is going to make you do them. Like, you can't avoid it, so get out there and choose first, and pursue something for whatever reason, whatever drives you, whatever fires you up, even if it's short term,
Yeah.
you be in charge of it rather than it being forced upon you. And I think for me, that's why I'm not stressed. Like, I just get in charge of what I'm doing all the time. It drove my parents insane, drove all my teachers insane, but it served me pretty well entrepreneurial so far. So I think I'm okay with it.
Yeah, you're doing all right, mate. I'll give you that much. Jesus. So, like, you talked about one thing I wanted to touch on as well is health, and because I know you're very passionate about that as well and looking after yourself.
Yep.
And if you're learning something each year, like, what if you all that wisdom, all those teachings and everything that you've brought you to this point, like, what does your morning look like then? Like, are there specific hacks that you do or things that you found that support you mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever that is? How does it look these days for you, mate?
Yeah, well, listen, I, in earlier, probably 5 years or earlier ago, part of that was, mornings were up early, having a shake, whatever, those sorts of things, but, the last 5 years, one of the best things that I've been doing, which I think has been fantastic, is, the fasting, the 16 and 8. It's been just the easiest thing to integrate in my life, and it's easy. It just stays there for me now. So, I don't eat until 1 or 2 o'clock, depending on when I finished eating the other day. Drink a lot of water in the mornings. I do have a black coffee, which doesn't interfere with it. I like my coffee, so I'm still able to have a coffee in the morning and fast. So that was important for one of my sort of high performance-y things. But that one for me, I think right now is the biggest impact for me in my wellness, mentally and physically. And the other thing that I weaved back in as kind of like first big rock in rather than last in, and I think many of us as parents get rid of our own personal exercise when we become parents and kind of put it in last. But I've put back, so 3 days a week I exercise, and 2 of those are doing something that I love, which is climbing. Not only am I staying physically fit, but it's something I really love doing. And then literally after this, I'm off to my trainer, and we do some special exercises for making sure I don't hurt myself as I get a little bit more mature in life. Just make sure my shoulders and arms and flexibility and stuff. So, for me, it's those 2 big rocks. I think have had a massive impact in the last 5 years. Moving and doing something you enjoy regularly, and it goes in first, not in last. And just this fasting, it's much easier for me than trying to think about what I'm eating. It's just like, don't eat as much and eat it in a period of time, and you can almost kind of eat anything, to be honest. So those 2 have been great for me, and I stick with them.
Yeah, fantastic. The fasting, yeah, I've introduced quite a number of years off and on, but more religiously the last 6 months or so. Like that very thing, squeezing everything into an 8 hour window where you eat. I still eat the same amount of food.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. There's a great, I'm sure you're aware of him, but David Sinclair, I believe his name is. He's got a book, Lifespan. That's it. Where I think he's been studying himself since his early 30s, and he's now in his 50s. So he's got a laboratory, and he's been studying his bloods and the effects of hormesis, which is using stress to heal stress, essentially within the body. And it's fascinating stuff. And it's definitely worth exploring if you're not,
No, I'll have a bit of a sticky at that one, and the other couple too. I think for me, the idea that an hour ago, just before I had a little 10-minute nap. Like I'll have a 10-minute nap every second day. I'll lay down either on the floor or somewhere and, put an eye mask on and turn on a guided meditation that takes 10 minutes. I've done that forever and a day. That's been amazing to handle stress. Like it's just been fantastic, so good when it comes to, those sorts of things. And then, of late, one of the things that I realized when now, and I can't speak for the ladies, and maybe this is not even the right way to say it, but when I found myself, in the GFC, because I was having some dark times and I really didn't like I was reviewing who I thought I was as a person. I pushed everyone away from me. I kept friends and people away. So I literally didn't have friends. Like we didn't have relationships and, conversations because I just felt probably at that point, if I'm honest, probably I didn't deserve them, or I didn't want them. I didn't want anyone to know me. Like it was a dark time of who I thought I was. So, the last 7 or 8 years, I've really made an effort. And I've had to make an effort because I've turned into a bit of a hermit to have friends regularly, talking, hanging out with them and stuff like that. So, I think that one's, I haven't mastered it yet, but certainly one in progress. And certainly I see the benefits of it often because, I can call up and chat to a friend, it was really nice, so yeah.
Right. Yes, I'm so glad you said that as we kind of wrap up the podcast. The I don't know if you heard, but there was a Harvard study. They studied men for, I think, through their whole lifespan up until their 80s, and the study finished about 10 years ago. And they wanted to know the number one key to happiness. So they studied hundreds of men or whatever it was, and the number one key to happiness was connection.
Mm.
And it was the friendships that were made and the bonds that were formed and being able to connect and having the right environment to support that, where life is so much nicer, isn't it? When it's like shared over a glass of wine or something, when you're having a really deep and meaningful with good people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, one of the things I did a bit of this stuff earlier in my life, but, I've had a few mentors of recent times, Arna Rubenstein comes to mind. He's down your way. Arna, beautiful fellow. It doesn't get talked about that much, but men having great relationships with other men, the love of other men in the right way is so important for us as men. And, I know a lot of high-performing men who mentally and emotionally isolate themselves, for some reasons. And, it certainly was doing me some damage and I noticed it. And, I got some great relationships now with some great people. And, if anyone's there sitting there right now going, yeah, that's me, I remember having this thing and I remember repeating it in my mind, it's lonely at the top and that's just how he likes it, and then I was like, fuck, that's dysfunctional, isn't it? Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. So we do have to be brave to risk those relationships, because sometimes we avoid them because we feel like we're going to be let down or let others down. So, I'm trying to be braver in that space and for the moment it's working out. So,
Clearly. Yeah, totally. Mate, to put a bow in this conversation today, because we've covered a lot of ground. We started off with money and going into bloody ayahuasca and then background and connections and everything. Just to tie it back up, like, what would you say to somebody listening to this today that might be struggling financially, that might be feeling they're in a bit of a hole? Like, any tips or things that would support one as they slowly move forward in life, because I think indecision is the worst decision of all, isn't it? We can quite often sit in that for some time.
Yeah. Listen, if we're sort of talking about money and people, feeling a bit overwhelmed with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe, couple of things. You don't have to know everything to get ahead with money. And there's a concept called pay yourself first, right? And in business, there's a concept called profit first. There's actually an awesome book called Profit First. But if you're not in business, you can do exactly the same thing for PAYG if you've got a job, right? Yeah, the best thing to do, Guy, if you make $1,000 a week, the moment you get that $1,000, you put $200 in a bank account you're never going to touch, and then you just deal with life with the rest of it, $800, right? If you do that for a year, you will feel so in control at the end of that year, it won't be funny. You will adjust your life to live on $800, not $1,000. And if I could say to anyone you're feeling overwhelmed, if you just want one tip right now, just take 20% of the net that comes into your bank account, or 20% of your net earnings, put it somewhere you won't touch, and maybe reach out to someone who would help you stay accountable to this, and put 2 people on a bank account to sign it. It gets away, but then you can't touch it. And then just learn and adjust your life to live on the other 80%. If you do that for 3 to 9 months, you will feel so empowered financially. It won't be funny. You don't have to know how to do all the fancy stuff. It's if you just do the one thing, learn how to pay yourself first, and everything else will roll from that. Like, I've seen it so many times. It's so powerful when your bank account now is $3,000 a year later, and then a year ago you couldn't even shout me a coffee. Do you know what I mean? You know, it's just one simple thing. Just take it off the top and don't touch it.
Yeah, I love it, mate. I wish I had that advice as a young man, I tell you. You know, last question for you, mate, is with everything we've covered today, is there anything you'd love to leave the listeners to ponder on?
Yeah. And I'll say it from my neck of the woods, because I say this to people all the time. You know, things to do with money and wealth take time. There's no such thing as get rich quick. It's complete and absolute bullshit. But what I can tell you is you don't have to invent Apple or Microsoft to be wealthy either. I see, like, I've been doing this for 22 years coaching people. And the people I coach have been investing, you know, prior to joining me. So I see people who, you know, just some regular folks who don't earn massive money ending up with, you know, tens of millions of dollars worth of wealth, you know, at age 60 and 70. And I can tell you, you know, it takes a bit of time, have some patience, and don't for 1 second get caught up in this get rich quick bullshit, because it's absolute rubbish. You know, it's a message that I see so much damage out there financially, and I'm just like, it doesn't work. But you know what does work? You know, getting rich slow. It works really well. I see thousands of examples of that. Thousands.
It doesn't sound so scary either. That's like
that's it.
Yeah, 1,000%. I know the amount of Facebook ads that seem to pop up in my face with some young kid in front of a Ferrari, mate. I'm like, come on. But no, beautiful. And look, if people are listening to this and they want to explore what you teach and what you do, Jason, where can I send them? Where's the best place?
Track down the Positive Real Estate website. We do have a Facebook page and a YouTube channel under the same name, Positive Real Estate TV on YouTube, you know, Positive Real Estate on Facebook, and the website. We've got heaps of free educational content. I do videos all the time and all sorts of stuff. So if you want to sort of get to know us from afar, you know, go and have a listen to what we've got to say. So, yeah. There you go.
You've either got a coffee or a glass of wine in your hand as well.
That's it. Yeah, 2 ends of the day. Yeah, exactly. And I took a tip out of Marcus Pearce's book when he did the, you know, studying the oldest people in the world, and said, like, most of them had a glass of wine every now and then anyway. So I'm like, oh, well, that's fine.
Exactly. Well, for anyone listening, the links will be in the show notes, whether you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, iTunes, everything will be below if you want to check out Jason and all his work.
Awesome.
Jason, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I absolutely love this conversation, mate. You have a huge heart. What you're doing is incredible. And I just feel honored to have you on and be able to share this with the audience that listen to my podcast. It's much appreciated, mate.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jason.
Cheers.